That night, I had another nightmare. This time I woke up in a void, just pure darkness. The only sound I could hear was an ominous hum all around me. It was like being stuck in space. It remained like this for a while. However, I was beginning to feel increasingly uneasy. White paintings of eyes began floating in the void. They weren't painted on anything, they just floated, and they looked exactly like the ones I saw in the 5th level of the game. Then they all suddenly stopped. For a second there was silence. Then a static noise began to play as they began floating towards me. The static got louder and louder as they inched closer and closer towards me. But just as I could feel them touch me, everything went black again. I can't exactly tell if what happened next was part of the same nightmare or another one I had later into the night, but I was suddenly dropped into a dark red hallway. There were no sounds at first, so I started to walk down in it. I remember I wasn't particularly scared or even slightly uneasy here. For whatever reason, I felt quite calm. I needed to make my way through a sort of red maze until I heard something say,
"Come here, Christopher."
It was a very deep sounding voice and it echoed throughout the many halls. There was no doubt in my mind that it was the same voice that the tall dark figure had in my previous nightmare. I was shaken up by this, but what other choice did I have other than to continue? I felt like my previous movements were almost dictated by something much more than just my own willpower, allowing me to come closer despite the increasing fear that I felt. As I got closer to the source of the voice, I could hear torches burning faintly down the hallway, and once I got there, I was greeted by the same room from my previous nightmare. A golden tomb lay before me in the center of the room, closed shut. The unease in the room became more apparent until the dark figure showed itself once more.
"I'm so glad to see you're back."
It said in a friendly manner, although that didn't really do anything to stop the feeling of panic that I felt seeing it again.
"You are so close now. Just 2 more floors left until you're at the bottom."
Suddenly, I realized I was completely frozen in place. No amount of wishing that I could move my limbs helped the fact that I was trapped in my own mind with this thing. Also, it just became clear to me that the dream suddenly started to become a lot more vivid. It didn't feel like a usual dream. It felt more like I was actually there. It felt more like a sleep paralysis rather than the usual nightmare at this point. I was started to get really paranoid about what would happen next. I was hoping maybe I'd start to hear some loud noise that would wake me up, but nothing like that happened. The nightmare wasn't over yet. The figure slowly approached me, but its footsteps barely made any sounds. As it was nearly right up in my face, it lifted me into the air and said,
"We will see if it has all been worth it. You can't go back now, so no use in regretting what you have done. What's done is done. Now, it is time for you to face your judgment."
As it said this, it paused for a moment before asking me.
"Are you ready?"
It was funny in a way since I couldn't even talk. The nervous laughter in my head was suddenly replaced with a feeling of confusion that quickly turned into panic as the strange pressure in my chest grew into a strong force that tore my chest and abdomen open. I was in agony. There was a hole in my chest and my ribs also began to crack. I could see chunks of my ribs falling out before I could feel my heart tearing apart from my internal organs and arteries. The pain was excruciating, but I could still see the figure take my heart into its hand and slowly back away. It then summoned a golden weighing scale and placed a feather on one end of it before it put my heart on the other. My vision blacked out right as my disconnected heart nearly touched the scale. I couldn't see anything, but I could faintly hear it say,
"You are a good person, Chris. Take solace in that."
I woke up in a sweat, breathing heavily, and at the same time as yesterday, I touched my heart and was glad that I still had my body parts intact. I wasn't really thinking per se, more so just examining my surroundings and making sure I wasn't under any sort of threat, like a caveman or animal would probably do. Once I did all that I simply laid down on my back and stared at the ceiling for a while. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? I guess the game was getting to me, but I wasn't sure why it was getting to me that badly. Simply thinking about the game now made me feel scared. Now you might say, well, duh, it's a horror game. But this wasn't that fun type of fear you get from playing those. It wasn't the ominous feeling you'd get from reading a scary story or a movie of some kind either. It was a lot more instinctual, something more akin to a phobia. I was tired, but also felt a lot more alert. The uncomfortable feeling just over my shoulder didn't leave me. I got out of bed and tried to do the usual morning routine of taking a shower, making myself breakfast, all of that. It was Sunday now, and I needed to make sure I got some proper rest, as well as spend quality time with my girlfriend once she came over. I couldn't, however, ignore the elephant in the room, which was Pharaohs' Crypt. This game was really getting to me, but it also intrigued me more than ever. So despite the obvious effect the game was having on my mental health, I thought that by playing it earlier in the day I could face my fears, as well as hopefully avoid another nightmare. I kept in mind that for 2 nights in a row now, the last thing I did was play the game for 1 or 2 hours, so with it being so fresh on my mind, it's no wonder that it influenced my dreams so much. Despite that, the dreams felt a little too weird, just a bit too real. My girlfriend would be coming over in the afternoon, stay for a few hours and then leave in the evening. I decided that in the meantime I could do a few more productive tasks before playing the game once again. I wanted to get at least 1 floor done. I wasn't entirely sure why I was so eager to get back into it after the nightmare I just had today. I suppose I just really needed to see what was next. After all, this seemed to be an extremely rare game, and searching for it online revealed no further details. I became a lot more like William, fighting through the fear and against demons in order to get to the bottom of that pyramid, or in my case, the game itself. Quitting now would also mean losing to my paranoia, and I'm somebody who likes to finish what he starts. It was the only way to satiate my curiosity, and eventually I got around to it. Starting the game up, this time around there was no background image on the title screen, nor was there any background music. It was simply the title of the game and the options. I found this quite off-putting, even for a horror game, and even in spite of the fact that I knew that the title screen changed as you progressed through the game. For whatever reason, a completely black background and no music made it feel really eerie. I clicked continue, and there was still nothing wrong with the oasis when I loaded in. It was really a safe zone from all the horrors. When I took the exit out of the oasis, I found myself in a strange room that looked like the depths of a cave, with a caged elevator on the other side of it, which would also be my way down into the next level. This elevator sequence was quite long. In fact, it lasted 3 entire minutes in real time. The faint sounds of machinery from the previous level could still be heard near the top of the ride, but eventually faded. As the ride progressed and the light got dimmer and dimmer, what replaced them was instead faint occasional whispering and a sort of rattling sound. After a really long way down the elevator with lights flickering along the way, it finally reached the bottom. The next level turned out to be a decaying mix of a lab and a mortuary. It was extremely disturbing. I could practically smell the stench of sweat from my screen. The music just resembled static now, and the lights flickered on and off. It was a very dark level with almost no light source other than the few flickering light bulbs, so I had to use the scarab amulet. Some of the cases were leaking brown, almost black fluid. Some of them were even open and showed bodies that were wrapped in bandages at differing stages of mummification. It was the first time I realized how harrowing Egyptian mummification truly was. Usually media explorers finding relatively clean body that then rises up and chases the characters through the halls of a pyramid. This game really put the death and decay into perspective, with all of them being covered in the brown fluid and some of them were even missing limbs or other body parts. Some were even decapitated. The wrapping wasn't always perfect either. Sometimes they had openings that revealed carcasses which were almost slowly turning into dust. However, every once in a while I would come across a body that looked slightly more fresh. Other than the multiple rooms acting as mortuaries, simply containing rows of cases with mummified bodies in them, were other rooms that resembled laboratories. Some of the laboratories earlier in the level only contained the thing someone would need to perform a successful mummification, such as the bandages used for wrapping, the canopic jars for storing the organs, as well as the instruments used for removing the brain during the process. However, when I got deeper into the level, things started to change. They went from looking like mummification chambers to downright torture chambers. These rooms were stained with blood and had scratches that looked like they came from desperate attempts to escape. These rooms also contained chains and other devices used to restrain people, and sometimes had body parts just laying on the floors. The most horrifying part, though, was that the instruments used for exacerbation were also present, and quite noticeably used. It appeared that the reason for some of the bodies looking more fresh was because they were. This also explained why a few of the bodies were missing their limbs. I guess the ones that got off gracefully were lucky to not be mummified while still alive. Things didn't stop there, however. Uncovering more of these morbid rooms, I eventually found ones with industrial and medical equipment, including sewing machines, drills, and circular saws. It appeared to be the origin of the enemies from the previous level. The faint whispering became nearly constant in these rooms. The floors were now drenched in that brown liquid, and I also noticed paintings depicting a shining eye of Horus within a triangle, surrounded by other occult symbols. They were very clearly being used in an attempt to perform some kind of ritual, or to receive some kind of occult blessing. It appeared as though whatever horrible things happened in these rooms were done so in an attempt to achieve some kind of enlightenment. Maybe by torturing a person and turning them into a biomechanical monstrosity was seen as merciful, and a higher existence by whatever sick. Honestly, I wasn't even sure if who did this was a person in any way at this point, but I had a feeling I would get acquainted with them very soon. This level utilized all the spells and items that I had in some way. The knife, for example, was used in one puzzle to dig out a key from one of the corpse's eye socket, while the other sonar spell could now be used to detect important items such as keys lying around the several chambers of this level. The weirdest part was that this level didn't seem to have any enemies. It was eerily quiet, although that didn't mean the level was without its hazards. But other than a couple of traps, there wasn't really any danger. Usually I'd be relieved, however it just made me feel all the more uneasy in this level. As I found the exit door, it became even more confusing that the game would simply just let me through. Right as I was about to open it, I heard a whisper behind me. I turned around and saw a tall, shadowy figure that disappeared too quickly for me to be able to tell any of its defining features. It was just like the thing I had seen in my nightmares, and I just didn't get it. I turned around quickly and made it to the oasis, saved my game and quit. I was pretty much frozen in place, unable to stop thinking about what I had just seen. This game was getting to me, more so than any other horror game. In fact, it stopped being the fun kind of fear a long time ago. Everything about this game, sure, the levels could get quite disturbing, the music was eerie, the idea of the descent through a long lost pyramid is creepy, but what really got to me, what really made me want to put away the game for a long time was the nightmares I was having. The 2 consecutive terrifying nightmares and the game. Sure, I could explain the message I got the day before as just a coincidence. In fact, I could explain all of this as just coincidental, but it no longer felt that way. There were too many things in common, and it was freaking me out. It freaked me out more than anything else did in my entire life. Following this, I was planning taking a long break from Pharaohs Crypt. I'm sorry, but the figure from my nightmares somehow appearing in my game was the final straw. I pushed away my own psyche when I started up the game again today, but instead of finding answers, I just found more questions. Somehow I just knew that they were the exact same entity, no matter how hard I tried to deny it. I was wondering how the game would be able to do any of this, I suppose. My questions would be answered if I just dug a little deeper. After all, I was surely getting to the end of the game now. Maybe one more floor left until I reached the bottom. I just had that feeling that I don't really know why. But at the moment, my sheer paranoia and anxiety completely overshadowed any kind of intrigue I had about that. More than anything, I just wanted the uncomfortable experience to be over. It was around 3 in the afternoon that my girlfriend, Jessica, finally came over. I was really happy to see her, although I suppose it would be a bit of a problem if excitement wasn't the first emotion I felt. We needed to come up with something to do. Now ordering a pizza did sound nice, but as a fun date idea, maybe we could try making one ourselves. The problem is I didn't really know where to start, so I decided to look up a recipe on the internet, as there was quite a few good ones. When I returned to my room, however, I found it strange that my PC had turned on, or was turned on, I don't really know. I just couldn't remember turning it on, only turning it off. Maybe Jessica was the culprit? Either way, I just decided to brush it off. After a few hours of doing stuff together, watching movies and such, Jessica noticed that something was off with me. We were laying next to each other in bed when she inquired about my strange behavior. I didn't even notice it myself. She said I was more quiet than usual and looked like I had something on my mind that weighed me down a little. I was, of course, hesitant to tell her about the video game, so I just told her I was probably just a bit tired. She didn't believe me, however, and kept insisting that I was acting strange, and that she knew something was bothering me. I thought about whether I should tell her some kind of made-up story to put her concerns to rest. Maybe something like I lost my wallet and didn't find it yet, which seemed to be a good choice. Then she probably wouldn't ask too many questions. So I told her that I lost my wallet while walking home on Friday, to which she immediately called my bluff and said, "Chris, I saw your wallet in the living room, on the dining table. I'm not stupid, you know. Now that the cat was out of the bag, I knew I had to come up with something else, or I could genuinely try to tell her the truth and hopefully not get sent to a psych ward. So I told her, Jessica, look, please, don't think of me as crazy, just try to be open-minded. She looked at me obviously confused. Hopefully she wasn't worried I'd tell her I was cheating on her when I told her to be open-minded. But she was still obviously willing to listen to me, as she was clearly waiting for me to say something more. I have had 2 consecutive nightmares these past 2 nights, and they made me feel somewhat unwell. I looked at her to see her reaction, but it didn't look like she had any objections yet. I think there's this game I started playing on Friday, and I think it has something to do with it. Jessica interrupted me. Well, can't say I'm surprised. Maybe don't play scary games before bed then, you dummy. And here I was thinking it was something actually serious. I could have given up at this point trying to explain it to her. However, that option didn't really cross my mind. And instead I felt the need to explain myself further. It's not like that. I feel like the game is something more. She paused for a moment, clearly not understanding what I was trying to say. With a confused look, she replied, What do you mean by that? I wiped my face with my hand and rested my hand on her, signaling to her that I really meant what I was saying. I mean, like the game is connecting with me in some way. It's hard to explain exactly what I mean by that. It feels like the nightmares are intentional, not coincidental. She laughed at me, obviously not taking me too seriously. After here I was a nearly grown man telling my girlfriend about nightmares I had because of a scary game. It is somewhat embarrassing when you think about it. She smiled and told me, Chris, you are such a baby. Hey, if it really scares you that much, why don't you show it to me later? She was a lot more playful rather than concerned now, and began to touch me more while smiling and giggling the whole time. It was obvious she wasn't taking me seriously at all, and now seemed more interested in mingling with me. It's not like I could blame her too much, however. After all, I probably needed to have a really good life if my biggest concern was bad dreams I was having because of a scary game. I also didn't want to be a buzzkill either and ruin our time together because of it. So I tried as hard as possible to not think about it and simply live in the moment. After we got done, she decided that she would stay over, and if I didn't have a problem with that, and I didn't have any problems with that, I was glad to have her by my side in case I would yet again have another nightmare. There was still some time left, and we weren't really tired just yet. But I decided not to show her Pharaohs' Crypt in the end. I was afraid it might just have the same effect on her, and that wasn't something I wanted to risk. So instead, we just decided to watch some short movies and talk about life until we finally went to bed. That night, I had a dream where I once again woke up paralyzed in the room with the sarcophagus. I can't say I was surprised at this point. I knew that this was coming. However, that didn't lessen the sheer panic I felt in the way. It was quiet, save for the few faint whispers I heard, along with the sounds of banging and stuff falling away off in the distance. This dream also felt more vivid, even more so than the last one. Then, white painting's eyes began to float all around the room, although for some reason I could once again tell they were only something I was seeing, not something that was actually a part of the scenery. Then, I heard a voice behind me.
What's the matter, Chris? You're slowing down. That is quite unfortunate. I had such high hopes for you.
It was a deep voice, and I could immediately tell who, or rather what it was. I wanted to tell it that I just wanted it to stop, but I couldn't. Suddenly, however, it said,
You want us to stop?
I didn't tell it anything, so it was frightening to know that it could now seemingly read my thoughts. I can't say, however, that it was anything breaking for me at this point.
If you want us to stop, Chris, then you would listen to me and face your judgment.
I couldn't really tell what it meant by that. Either way, I was beginning to feel even more afraid and panicked now.
Didn't I already tell you? You cannot turn back now. So finish what you started, Chris. Don't be a coward.
The figure then teleported in front of me. This time I could see its features slightly better than before, but it wasn't anything I could describe. It looked like a mix of an extremely old man and the rotting carcass of an animal. He pulled out a spear, and just as it was getting ready to do what God knows what, I heard another voice say, "Chris, Christ, wake up. It's just a dream, it's alright, nobody is..." I suddenly woke up and screamed. I was covered in sweat, but at least my girlfriend was right next to me, brushing my cheek in an attempt to make way up. When I looked at her, she looked genuinely concerned. She was still holding my hand and making sure I was okay. I asked her what I was doing, and she told me, "Chris, you were shaking and mumbling the whole time. Are you okay?" I took a moment to collect my thoughts and told her, "Yeah, I guess I am, Jessica. Don't worry about me too much." I'll be honest with myself. I started to reconsider whether the hiking trip was such a good idea, considering the nightmares I was having. I also had no clear way to get rid of them, but I was at least glad Jessica managed to pull me out of this one. I was really grateful. In the end, I pulled her close to me and decided to get some more sleep. She still looked quite distraught, but slowly began to calm me down once we embraced and eventually got back to sleep. When I woke up that morning, I was actually pleasantly surprised that I didn't have any additional nightmares. Maybe it was finally going away. Jessica woke me at pretty much the same time and asked, "How are you feeling, sweetie?" I was quite groggy, which made sense since I didn't get any true quality sleep for 3 days in a row now, but I still told her, "I feel fine. I'll just need some coffee." She gave me a kiss and got up from bed. She headed to the living room while I just thrashed around for a while more in bed, thinking about the night's events. I can't say I was surprised in any way at this point, more so just glad that she woke me up and the nightmares didn't come back at any point later in the night. When I finally decided to get up, I caught her making the coffee I had indirectly requested for me, so I went up to her and hugged her. At this point, I was also well aware that I was going to have to go on that hiking trip soon, even if I wasn't feeling like I was in the best shape due to a lack of sleep in general. Before I did any of that, however, she decided to inquire further about what was going on. She confronted me while I still had my coffee in my hand. "Chris, was that the third nightmare you had in a row? Do you have any idea why you could be having them?" I felt somewhat frustrated as I already tried to explain it to her yesterday. "Jessica, please, I told you, I think it's the game, it's some way to get..." She interrupted me. "There is no way you'd be having these sort of nightmares from a video game." These sort of nightmares, I guess I never explained to her just how terrifying they were, although I suppose my behavior while I was having them spoke for itself. Also, if it really is the game, why don't you just stop playing it?" Frustrated, I told her, "I already tried, Jessica. I haven't touched it since you came." "Since I came? So you played it yesterday just before I came?" "Yeah." She burst out laughing. I guess I was really somewhat stupid. Maybe I just needed more time and I would let go of the game somehow. Just forgetting the entire thing exists felt like the best option. The rest of the morning we spent doing the usual together until we finally had to go at around lunchtime. After lunch, which consisted of the leftover pizza from yesterday, I packed my stuff, made sure she was ready as well. When I went to my room, however, I found that my PC was once again turned on, which was strange, but I didn't really think much of it and just shut it off. After that we got in the car and I drove her back to her place, after which I was headed to a rendezvous point with my buddies. I arrived at around 2 p.m. It wasn't very far away from my place, but a mix of strangely bad traffic from what I assume was an accident somewhere down the road, and having to bring my girlfriend back to her place ate up quite a bit of more time than I thought. At the very least I wasn't super late, but it was still a few minutes after everyone else had already arrived. "Well, look who it is," one of my friends shouted with a sarcastic undertone. "Chris, glad to see you, man." Another one added before following up with, "How are you feeling, Chris?" "Oh, I'm feeling great," I replied back, lying through my teeth. However, I was still hoping the hike would give me a rush of energy and dopamine. One way or another, being outside and in nature was a welcome change for me. I took my stuff out of the car, put it on my backpack, and we started climbing the first hill of many. It all went well for the first few hours. I was actually feeling great. The exercise I got along with being with my friends, and the sunlight helped me get my mood up. Once the clock hit 6, the evening started to slowly roll around, and we needed to find a place to set up camp for the night. Going off trail and deeper into the forest, we eventually found an abandoned shack. It didn't seem like anyone owned it, so we took the risk and set up camp there. I didn't assume we would get lost, as we still had our compasses and had a map of the area, which made it so that we could still tell what our approximate location was, and the nearest trail was only about a mile away. We would put our sleeping bags and mats inside the shack and started a campfire outside. We had plenty of food, but we would probably need more wet wood to keep the fire going. And so I was sent out with an axe, one of my friends, and a hunting knife to find some more wet wood deeper off trail into the forest. Eventually we found a pretty good spot. Although we were quite far away from our camp, completely isolated, and it was also getting dark now. Luckily, my friend was making sure we wouldn't get lost, but for some reason I felt off. Not like I was sick, but more so like I was being watched. I began to chop into one of the fallen trees with my axe, and carefully took off large chunks of wet wood when I noticed that the tree had a carving in it. It was of an eye, quite similar to those in my nightmares. Maybe my friend was just playing tricks on me, so I asked my friend if he saw it as well. "Yo man, take a look at this. Kinda weird somebody would just carve an eye out of an eye like this, right?" "An eye? I don't know, it seems more like just a circle to me." "Circle? I guess some people don't have as much imagination. Or maybe I am just paranoid." As I gathered just about enough wood, I was ready to go back to camp. I put all of it in my backpack, and just as I got up, I saw a tall shadow briefly before disappearing right amidst the trees. Quite freaked out, I told my friend in as calm of a voice as I could, "Hey, we should really get going." I tried to play it off cool, but really I was in full fight or flight mode after what I saw that shadow. Still, I told myself that it was probably just an animal or something. Surprisingly, nothing strange happened on our way back, and we got back to camp just fine. I put my backpack down, took out the wet wood, and we started making dinner while talking about the unusual things, usual things. All of us were getting quite tired, but since we probably wouldn't be on a trip like this just by ourselves for quite a while, we want to make the most of it. The 2 packs of beers one of my friends brought helped quite as well. But I didn't want to drink too much so that I wouldn't get hungover on top of everything else.